Yet bina everyone. She Ethel Branchin, she Pimpatotni Nashla, Nakai Buses Chin, Sitna Janita Che, Ado Naka Dashanella. She Deneba Washington, Big Aitso. My name is Ethel Branch. I'm the nation's Attorney General, and it's an honor to be here with all of you. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Friday. I apologize for the slight delay in our start. And very excited for today's topic, local government law on Navajo. And of course, very happy to have a wonderful, distinguished panel here with us today. We have quite a number of individuals that many of you may be familiar with who are well known for their work relating to local government on Navajo Nation. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves. I think we'll go ahead and start with Tony Skrlanis.
Thank you, Ethel. Tony Skrlanis, Tony Chin in the end, Schleto, Tachini, all the Thawani, Basheen, and I come from a big mountain on Black Mesa. I'm also the division director for economic development and also one of the crafters of the local governance act. And so we spend a lot of time on it. I'll go a little bit into that history, but it's an honor to be here today with you to share some of the history and some of my hopes and dreams about the LGA.
Great, thank you so much for that, Tony. And then we'll bring in Arvin Mitchell as well. Arvin, do you want to introduce yourself and give a little background on your connection to the LGA? Arvin, I think you may be on mute, perhaps. Can we bring Rod up while we figure that sound out? Rod, you want to introduce yourself?
Okay. Yes. Yad Anotho. Roderick Begayan. Kodik National being the Tone Bashashin. Kiana Adas Chado Sitna Janita Chanela. Tselana Eadet Nasha. I'm one of the Assistant Attorney Generals with the Navajo Nation Department of Justice. I currently lead the DOJ chapter unit.
Great, thanks so much, Rod. And let's try Arvin again. Arvin. There we go. Arvin Mitchell is the director of the Division of Community Development. We're continuing to have sound challenges there, so we'll just go ahead and move forward. And if he's able to join later, Arvin has a lot of experience implementing the LGA, and so we were hoping to have him be part of this conversation. But we'll go ahead and get started. The first question is really what the intent behind the LGA is. Tony, do you want to give us a little bit of background? I understand you played a key role in the passage of the LGA.
Well, Ethel, I think one of the things that we have to look back in around like 1995, 1994, a lot of the chapters they're really concerned. They really had just resolutions and really simple like land management. They couldn't do zoning. All the chapters were all the same. There was one salary for what was called a chapter coordinator. The coordinator worked for the council delegate. There was 88 council delegates at that time, and chapters really had no. There was no incentives. There was no ability to create revenue. Chapters couldn't even write for grants. It was really kind of a hard time. And where I came in was I was getting my MBA at that time, and I was helping chapters do like community-based like economic plans and doing a lot of study, but I know that there was a lot of challenge of you could do a really nice plan, but then it had no teeth, right? And so you still like, oh, you had to get permission to do a land use plan, and then it had to be approved by the tribal council. And so a lot of chapters wanted to they wanted to really take over. You know, they really wanted more authority, more autonomy. They wanted to, and I know that we're very Navajo Nation was very centralized, and a lot of my study was how do we empower communities where they're really in charge of their decisions, their mistakes, and their successes. And really, that's what chapters were after. Was like, you know, we'll zone, we'll make decisions. We want to be self-sufficient. We want to flourish. We want to be different. We want to create our own governance and create our own tools, create our own ordinances. We want to manage our own staff. You know, some of us are bigger. We can have more staff. Some of us are smaller. So, you know, I know one of the requests was they wanted like legal counsel locally. They wanted their own accounting, their own salary structures. A lot of them wanted to do zoning ordinances. They wanted to create like laws themselves at the local level, things like green belts, things like architectural standards. Their revenue was really big too, and they wanted to be able to do. And right after we passed this law, we worked on the Navajo sales tax. We also worked on a business site leasing delegation from Congress because it all really supported the Local Governance Act implementation. We also got money from HUD to do like land use planning, comprehensive land use planning. So the intent was really to empower, and we had a lot of differing at that time. This was really the big thing, big item on the Navajo Nation's agenda. President Hale at that time won on the mandate of local empowerment. And he really, I remember him saying, bid, you know, the chapters, give them the tools, you know, and give them the resources, give them, you know, just everything is all the Navajo Nation, everything's at the top, you know. And what President Hale wanted was like this, you know, where everything is more at the local level. And so we integrated that. We integrated that into the Local Governance Act. It was really a compromise document. It had there was a need for some checks and balances. There was a need for separation of powers. There was a need for accountability, and so we you know. But there was a lot of work that went into that. So, but man, the intent was really like full-on empowerment, you know. So that was really what the intent was.
Great, wonderful. Rod, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, just following along with what Tony was saying. One of the things the legislative history points out was this compromise idea, because you can see the Office of Government Development proposing, you know, real, true local governance in terms of, you know, possibly offering home rule municipality status. And, you know, a lot of times I talk about what is home rule, you know, and, you know, that basically, from a very simple explanation, it's a little bit more complicated, but it's really power empowerment at the local level. The people have the power, not the mother government. And so the local power, you know, they have executive, legislative, and judicial authorities, and the central government only has, you know, they have to spell out their powers, or there has to be a law, they call it a law of general applicability, that, you know, that would, I guess, that's the only way to divest local communities from having that power. And so you come from that big local empowerment concept, and then as the history shows, that you know, was significantly reduced, but at the same time, as Tony was saying, there were some goals in mind. You know, chapters, you need to create a fire management system, and a fire management system wasn't born in 1998. It was born in the 80s. And so, chapters, there was incentives in place for chapters to become LGA certified. In terms of land management, they had to have a certified land use plan. And so all of these things, so in terms of compromise, they didn't have automatic self-empowerment like a home rule municipality would have, but they could gain these authorities by following, the processes that have been established. And so that was a compromise that Tony's talking about. And, I think the intent was, kind of saying, well, we've been telling you chapters for many years now that you need to have a fire management system. You haven't done so yet, but if we create this incentive and spelling out what your duties and powers could be, maybe that will entice you to be, LGA certified and to have a certified land use plan and a certified fire management system. So, those come to mind when I talk when I hear Tony talking about a compromise. It was really, we're not going to give you all the powers up front, but if you do these things and you demonstrate that you can, exercise these powers, then we will give you more and more power. So, I think that was a part of what the intent was behind the LGA.
That's really interesting. And one thing that comes to mind just as a student of government, when I was in grad school, I studied Navajo local government and government reform in particular. But one of the things that I think we struggle with at Navajo Nation is that we have sort of the superimposition of a Western style of governance on a traditional structure. One of the things that I think is most interesting about the LGA is that it facilitates the transition or sort of the decolonization of local government and the reassertion of traditional governance models and institutions. And this kind of goes into the next question, which is, what are some of the successes of local government, and have we seen sort of the reclaiming of local government and the reassertion of traditional institutions of governance?
Well, he wants us to jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a little bit ahead, but the next question is, has the LGA fulfilled its purpose?
Well, I think that's a really deep question, and I'm glad like Roderick's here because he's kind of seen all the implementation processes. I think what the intent was, this was a Navajo Nation law, right? And some of the authorities is things like, and there was a lot of incentives too at that time. Is like when I remember Shanto got LGA certified. I think Tuba City was not too far behind. You had all these chapters start getting certified, and there was an incentive. The Navajo Nation actually provided, like, there was a lot of support. This was the discussion. There was a lot of work in preparing the LGA too. There was massive summits. There was all kinds of outreach with our medicine people, with our traditional people, our elders, our veterans. We had like a real cerebral processes with the universities, and I know Harbor Kennedy School of Government was involved in that. UNM. I mean, there was a lot of there was a lot of study into this, and there was a lot of reports created out of it. So this was the topic, and what the intent. One of the things that was supposed to happen is that when the law was passed and the chapter gets certified, that they then be given the resources, and that they can start. One of the things like, say, contracting Navajo Nation, right? You can contract programs or like general funded, or even if it's federal funded, work with the feds. But one of that, I was living and breathing this for 4 years, and what that authority was like, it was almost like a BIA 638 contract. It's like we would, a group of chapters could get together. We'd give them some guidance as a Navajo Nation central government. A group of chapters come together, and they're LGA certified. Maybe one or two aren't, but the goal is efficiency. So they together can then ask for to take over, let's say the Division of Economic Development, let's say some of our functions, right? So those are some of the things that I feel like was never even tried, chapters. One of the authorities is like their sales taxes, right? Sales taxes, a chapter does a sales tax ordinance, they start giving the sales tax revenue. But what we crafted in there was the ability to do like financing. They could do like incremental tax financing for infrastructure. They could actually own a like shopping center. They could own a hotel, co-own it. And so we did a lot of study on things like how the League of Cities and Towns do it out in the municipalities. We got a lot of guidance from a lot of people. I mean, this was not done in a vacuum. And so I feel like it was never even fully tested. That's my concern, is that only one chapter right now has the authority over business site leasing. The Navajo Nation never ever, especially our executive branch, we've never ever have really supported implementation. We always put up roadblocks for these chapters. So that my answer is it was never even tried. It was never ever fully implemented. Very few, and that's kind of where we sit right now. Is that I feel like we're almost, because I was there 20 plus years ago. It's almost the same situation, and maybe even harder for chapters now. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Fascinating. Thanks so much for that insight, Tony. And it looks like we have Mr. Mitchell here with us. Director Mitchell, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe give your thoughts on the intent of the LGA and whether it's fulfilled its purpose?
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon, Yate. Orban Mitchell. Sort of had problems logging out, but anyway, I'm on right now. Back to your question on LGA. Originally from White Dunes, Flagler, Arizona. So the intent, like what Mr. Tony just covered here a while ago, the intent of what Tony just covered is almost the same as what my version of it would be. How did I get involved with this LGA? I just stayed at Flagler. My late cousin Albert Hale, past president, was from Flagler. So just me following him around during his campaign, saying, let's give the power back to the people. And during that time, he was calling it local empowerment. And what he wanted, like what Tony just covered, let the people make the decision on what is needed at the local level. So just based on that, I wasn't into government that time. So just hearing him talk about it, and the election happened, he won the presidency. So after that, we're trying to put this LGA and what Tony just covered from his version, then government development version, some compromise has happened. But like what was stated, was never fully implemented. And in order to fully implement it, the Navajo Nation needs to make it a priority. And a little background for myself, back I worked for President Hale, and then I also worked for President Begay, the Lake Council Begay. So during that time, we monies down to the chapters, saying that okay, so money, we took it down to the chapters. That's why to this day you have monies that are given to the chapters. And then after President Begay, I worked for Joe Shirley, and his priority was local empowerment. So we did a lot of activities under local empowerment. That's where we certified 30, I think 38 chapters to be LGA certified. So thereafter, it sort of started going downhill because directors that in community development didn't make it a priority, and upper leadership didn't make it a priority. So since I'm back in DCD, I'm trying to make it a priority where we sort of fully intend what the LGA was meant to be. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Director Mitchell. And Rod, I'm going to pass this question to you. What do you think can be done to still fulfill, or what has hindered full flight of the LGA or full implementation, and what can still be done to fulfill the Act's intent?
Okay, so as as Arvin and Tony knows, um, about 8 years or 7 years after the LGA was passed, 5 out of 110 chapters were LGA certified at that time. And Navajo leadership really placed an emphasis on both DCD and DOJ to come up with a streamlined process. So we got together with various departments, including the Auditor General, to develop a standardized file management system just to help chapters, more and more chapters get governance certified. And then that file management system was recreated or amended in 2010. And so, again, just to revitalize the effort for, incentivizing chapters to become LGA certified. And so, with regards to the question, some of the hindrances was central government's own enactments. Because the intent, again, we just got talking about the intent, was central government saying, show us you can do a fiscal management policy. Show us that you can implement a personnel management system so you can handle your own employment matters. Show us that you can establish a records management system, in compliance with the Navajo Nation Privacy Act. Show us that you can implement a procurement system that's on par with the Navajo Nation Procurement Act. There's all of these delegations that were, on the horizon for all chapters to, hey, they're going to get all of these powers once they become LGA certified. But then what hindered some of that is that, some of the, delegations without certified management systems in place. So, 5 months after the LGA was passed, council passed a independent grant of authority allowing chapters to spend money without a fiscal management system. They passed the Sales Tax Act a few years later. They empowered chapters to handle certain personnel matters for PEP workers. These things progress. If you look at the chapter budget policies today, there's a lot of implicit authorizations granted by the mother government to chapters. So some chapters are saying today, why should I become LGA certified? I have all the power that I need right now. Some local communities don't have the sales tax base. They don't have, areas to, establish businesses. And so they're saying, well, I have no incentive to become LGA certified to gain those authorities, but I have everything I need already right now. All of these things have happened over the 26-year history that they're saying, Adoniyeta, the LGA, we have everything we need right now. There's no incentive anymore. And so how can we revitalize it? I think that's why I've created some models that maybe can revitalize that effort. And I think that's, Mr. Mitchell, he's shared his version of the Local Empowerment Act from 2012. And, I think we just need to come together and, entice chapters to say it is worth it. If you don't need local business leasing authority, that's fine. But you do, if you want to contract with other chapters, if you want to regionalize, which is available under the LGA right now, then get governance certified. You might not need all of the powers, but you sure should want to exercise a lot of the authorities listed in Section 103 of the Local Governance Act.
Great, and that's a great transition, Rod, because there are some local governments at Navajo Nation who have embraced the LGA and are just going gangbusters. So I want to talk about those governments, the local governments that are doing LGA right. So maybe, Tony, you want to get us started on that conversation?
Sure. I guess we can. I'm really intimate with Shanto. Shanto got LGA certified, and then they adopted alternative forms of government. Now that's where we start doing. In crafting LGA, we actually wrote a history book too. It's called Navajo Government History from a traditional knowledge standpoint. All the books at that time were written from a Western model, like kind of Western history model. We wrote one based on our traditional stories, and we looked at separation of balances since the beginning of the universe, and checks and balances, things like that, separation of authorities, and just how the universal, like the natural laws were created. So in that, we also looked at study like how were elections done a long time ago, if there was such a thing, and that's where we came up with the Council of Na'Tah government. Council, and really a long time ago there wasn't like a chapter officials, like we didn't have like people running to be like, hey, I want to vote for me, I'm the best candidate, because that went against our traditional teachings. We're not supposed to boast like that. We're taught not to think bad thoughts about others and try to like act like you're better than others. It was really based on honor and how one was living their life. And so Council of Na'Tah was that model, and I'll come at it from that. And really that's what Shanto adopted, that where people didn't actually vote for that person. They actually had a precinct where the elders and the folks gathered, and they select somebody to represent that precinct. Shanto adopted that model, and they combined it with a kind of like what they call a commission form of government. And the chapter president still elected, but you have commissioners, and what they were also trying to deal with was the 25 quorum requirement. And there's a lot of problems with that 25 quorum, guys. I mean, I've studied that, and just there's a real. I don't want to get into that, but that was a real concern even back then. And so that was based on like the New England town hall model, that was adopted a long time ago, but it kind of had worn out its effectiveness. And so Shanto really studied that, and they came up with that. I think they also really have excelled at business development. They've created Shanto Economic Development Commission. They've created enterprises out of that, and I've seen them really, really excel. They have business site leasing authority too. And so I think, now you see the fruits of their labor. They have a lot of development there at the 169, that road that goes to Cage. I think we're going to be doing a grand opening of a new hotel there, but that's really owned by the chapter. So I'll just give that one example. That's kind of something that I've really watched, but it really combines a lot of different things of LGA, and they're really, there's still kinks in that process, guys. It's not perfect. We're still having to help them, but So, and again, when we presented the LGA to the council, I remember saying this to the council. I said, "We're never going to have a perfect document. We're never going to have that. But that's why you're the legislature. We can always fix things. We can always work out the kinks, And I think that's what we're doing now. So I'll just talk about this, Shanto.
That's really interesting what you're saying, because especially where we are now in sort of the trajectory of democracy, and we're seeing it, struggle, even in the United States. And what you're talking about is interesting because it's not, and like the discussion of the quorum, because what you're saying, almost not what you're saying, but what I'm gathering from that is that maybe the culturally appropriate style of engagement is really just having leaders, like clan leaders, come together and make decisions for the community, rather than having like the entire community come together and have these discussions. Mm-hmm. And that could be more fruitful in moving nation forward, certainly at the local level.
Yeah. Well, then some of the stuff that we studied even was how to hold a meeting using traditional tools, how to actually have like an elder, almost like an elder that serves almost like a peacemaker, just how you set up your meeting structure. I mean, we studied a lot of that kind of stuff, So all that's still available and it's still relevant. So no, I totally agree that's because you're getting more into an honorable system, and that's what people wanted, and I still hear that, like especially now, man, our chapters they're just spanned. We really have. And I was really lucky to witness, as I'm sure these gentlemen, I know Arvin has, how chapter meetings were done, even non-LGA 25 years ago. There were still elders that were officials, and it was all and real like humor and honor in these meetings, And I witnessed a lot of chapters like that. So, that they just, that was a big thing. It was they just, So,
Great.
mhm.
Well, there's so much more I'd love to talk about from what you said, Tony, but we're going to keep the conversation going. So I'm going to hand things over to Arvin. Tell us about an example of a chapter or a local government you think that has really done Local Government Act implementation well.
Let me sort of backtrack to one of your comments a while ago.
Oh, sure, certainly.
Government, United States government, we're coming up to July the 4th, 1776.
Yeah.
How many years is that? I say, we're like 200 years, close to 300 years since 1776. We have a perfect government. Now we still have quite a ways to go in creating a perfect government. So LGA only here like 98. So it's just an infant stage. But like what President Hale used to say, those were the words of our elders. It's all up to you on how you're going to have your life, how you're going to run your community. But back to your question, give us an example on which chapters are filling their LGA intent. I would say, I always bring up Tonanistiza.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
Is a good chapter.
Yeah.
One of the biggest chapter that we have on the nation. And when I go out there, they provide a lot of services. I've never really seen them come to Window Rock say that, okay, we need this for our chapters, maybe for capital outlays, but even on the capital outlay, give them the money through a grant agreement, and they got their own project managers, and we don't hear from them. They're running everything their own. So I would say 20. And then the other one is, we give chapters their general funds allocation, and then also their claims money. So, they're making payments out there, which I've always said, we gave them monies and now they're making payments. And when you come to Window Rock, if you try to make a payment, it takes a while. It takes a while to issue those payments. Mm-hmm. So to me, all the 110 chapters are doing well making payments, NCUA payments, and all the services and good that needs to be paid out there. But within central government, sometimes we have a hard time making payments. So I would say all the 110 chapters are doing good in that area, and you don't have to call me. Before we did that, every day I would get calls from the chapter saying that our power is being turned off because we still haven't processed the payments. Then the other one is the I think there's like 15 or 16 chapters, LGA certified chapters, under the sub-recipient agreement with ARPA. A few of them are doing good. I would say Whippoorwell's doing good. They got their second allocation. Peaceto, I think, got their second allocation. And the others are still working on their first allocation. And we'll be meeting with Shin Lee this afternoon. See if we can get them their second allocation, all that. So to me, those are positive things. And for capital outlay, I know that a while back, New Mexico capital outlay, we wanted the state of New Mexico to work directly with the certified chapters. We did that for 1 year, but the problem that we ran into is that New Mexico capital outlay, they operate under a reimbursement process. So some of these certified chapters, they didn't have the money up front
Oh.
their capital outlay. So it became a problem. It became a problem, and then Governor Suzanne Martinez said, this probably wouldn't have worked unless you give the chapters more money to have them upfront the capital outlay. So we did away with that. So they had the money, probably been working good right now. So there's some positive good stuff out there that happened after the LGA, the 5 management system was put in place back in 2010. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Director Mitchell. I'm so glad that you highlighted Tuba City because they have such a substantial amount of tax revenues, and the LGA chapters that pursue that, and you've highlighted that with LGA authority, chapters can become more fiscally strong, not only more fiscally strong but also more nimble and being able to pay their bills more quickly, for example, as you've highlighted. And then Director Skrlanis mentioning Shanto chapter that has just done really incredible things in terms of economic development. And one of the things I want to go see someday is Rock the Canyon. And so they're just doing really great things. They built that hotel and that really lovely gas station that I enjoy stopping at. And I think the tourists really enjoy stopping at the junction of the road between Page and the road that connects, I think it's 264. So just really great things that they're doing. And so Rod, what are your thoughts on a chapter that is implementing LGA well and making full use, or at least really great use of the LGA that can actually, through these examples, create the incentive and the model to the other chapters on what is possible if they step up and they take on LGA authority?
Okay. First, I'll agree with both Tony and Arvin on Shanto and Twinanestiza. We're currently working with Shanto on their business site leasing again recently, and then with Tuba City. Tuba City is an example of can't wait. We can't wait in order to exercise local governance. So under the LGA, it says, you can pass a local sales tax, but you got to wait for a sales tax code to be implemented. Well, Tuba City didn't wait. They got independent sales tax authority, and that's how they're able to build such a strong tax base for that. And so and the other thing they did too was they amended their alternative form of government, and so exercising and realizing that, hey, we can change our form of government to the structure that meets our community's needs of a more of a representative form of government, getting away from the old BIA created, town meeting structure, in order to get things done. A lot of chapters struggle with quorum. And so, they've found the ability to address those kind of issues. So chapters, if you're having trouble with quorum and you want to get things done, get LGA certified, and you can create an AFOG in order to take advantage of some of the powers in the LGA. But the one I'll highlight, most recently is Chinle chapter. They have been really assertive. They've tried to pursue a sales tax recently, and they also have a subrecipient agreement for the some of the ARPA projects, and so they're very active. We had the Chinle flood a few years ago, and so interacting with others and trying to navigate how can we build a better barrier between the community and the potential for flooding and that comes out of the canyon. So they're I think they're more of the progressive. They have a lot of employees. If you go to Chinle chapter, they have a lot of employees, and so a lot of chapters are still stuck with the two main ones that are hired and fiscally supported by Winderock and the annual appropriations, and the public employment employees, the PEP workers. But some chapters, that are LGA certified, really took advantage of that and have expanded their employees, and so they've really taken advantage of those things to address what they need. Because I say a lot of times that chapters are underfunded, and don't have enough employees, but those chapters that, like Tuba City and Chinle, that have additional employees that created those positions, that are able to pay on their own for those employees, it demonstrates what the LGA can do for local empowerment, local communities. So that's what I'll say.
Great, fantastic. I'm so glad you mentioned Chinle, Rod, because I worked with Chinle chapter during the pandemic, and they are just, wow, such a well-run machine. I mean, like you said, they have AmeriCorps volunteers that they have there, even now, doing lots of things for the community. They didn't shut down during the pandemic. They continued to operate, and they provided relief to all of the chapters in Chinle agency. They were doing 2 food distributions every week. It was really amazing to see. And then they've done other incredible things, like worked with different forest and nonprofit entities to bring wood to their elders. And they're just doing really, like you said, incredible things. They have a huge staff. So it's really exciting to see Chinle. And I do hope that they are able to take on tax authority and have more control over spending, like keeping those tax dollars local and spending it the way they want to, because they have such an incredible vision for future development in their community as well. So it's exciting to see what Chinle may do with their authority. So, wow, this is a really, really great conversation. And for the chapters that have not yet taken on LGA authority, I think it's a great eye-opening experience for them to think about, if we take on this authority, there's so much we can do. But even so, I think just the implementation of LGA and sort of the modeling, the best practices that have sort of risen to the top. Rod, you mentioned that some of these things are being incorporated into Navajo laws, being available to all chapters, because we can see through local government implementation utilizing LGA that these things are working, and it's creating these naturally emerging styles of governance and management, governmental management, that can be spread all across Navajo government, even if chapters don't take on LGA authority. So, one of the things that Rod mentioned was that regionalization actually could be an option for chapters that do go LGA. And really, to me, it's more of confederation, right? Chapters saying we all have shared challenges and interests and objectives, and we want to work together, consolidate our tax revenue, and pursue development, economic development, as well as governance together. Maybe have the more fully staffed professional team locally through, what's that business term? Efficiencies. Tony probably knows what I'm trying to say. But what do you think about that? I mean, do we? There are some governments that are emerging, some regional governmental structures. I don't think there are any under the LGA, and if there are, please share with me what those are. But that's kind of an interesting opportunity for governments.
Well, Ethel, one of the things that I think chapters did for a while was they formed an association of LGA certified chapters, and they're really following the state model. Like Arizona has an agency called League of Cities and Towns, and they actually elect a member, from the other leaders across the state. They elect a leader, right? Leaders, and they really advocate for the cities and towns, because there's always state law that goes in and tries to usurp some of the authority. And I think that was really what Navajo chapters were after. And so I feel like that representation is direly needed. But the other part of it is that when President Hill and Speaker Kelsey Begay were in charge, we had a lot of study on this. There was Community Support Services was an agency under the executive legislative branch, and it transferred over to the community development. But we had all kinds of workshops on all these things we're talking about. It was constant, and I feel like that kind of thing is really missing. And the study too, the research, the engagement of a lot of people from traditional groups to universities. The chapters. I mean, the idea. I mean, no chapter. I don't think any chapters have really done let's say banding together. I mean, and the intent was that not every chapter had to be LGA certified. If you had one with two neighboring chapters that are not LGA certified, they could still work together, and that we really needed some work around how do you efficiently and gain responsibility from the central government. How do you, because the compromise now, what President Hill had wanted to do was just take 30% of the whole nation and give it to the chapters, and then a few years later get another 30%, and by the end of his term, he said only 15% of it will be in the central government. And I kind of felt guilty for stopping that, because that would have, if the nation had just done that, that's really what I think was the intent, was slowly for that there be regionalization, that there be all kinds of innovativeness, and people would come together, and we, there'd be, one of the things that we never thought about was county governments, and just how you could create regional governance. What would that model be like? We never got that far, and I feel like that's really the fertile ground. And I know Roderick is really spending his time on that. Is how can chapters come together and take over central government responsibility? And maybe the model is that we have to actually craft that process, and we actually have to initiate some of that regionalization. But again, we can't stop it from the nation. We have to let the chapters take over those things. We have to actually so maybe the LGA works hand in hand with the regionalization, so those are just some thoughts.
Yeah. Arvin, I know you have to leave soon. Do you want to chime in?
Okay. On the regionalization, I think if we're going to follow a model, the Sitchin regional government, finding of six chapters, I think if we're going to follow a model, they have a good model. And one thing that I know, when former Delegate Weatherspoon was on council, I've worked and to change the emergency fund allocation. So we inserted mitigation into that process. So what we did when we did that was for that region, those chapters started working with Black Mesa Mine, and they got Red Dog, gravel. So when you go that way, they have their roads gravel. So that's how a regional planning, regional taking care of projects, that would be beneficial for the chapters within the region. So, they work pretty good. Those chapters work pretty good. But other chapters within their within a region, a delegate region right now, some of them don't want to work together. But within the Black Mesa, Cislejean region, seems like we're working pretty well together. So like you said, I'm gonna be logging off. I have another meeting to tend to, and I'd like to thank DOJ for putting on this show here. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for joining, Director Mitchell. We're honored to have you here with us and sharing your wisdom. So thank you again. So some of what Director Mitchell as well as Director Skolanis is talking about, to me, really makes me think of the nudge, right? Like where the going back to traditional governance, you had the local governments essentially, but then you had them all coming together every few years to talk about the challenges that were facing those governments at a local level. And then there was that dynamism of, maybe someone was saying the Spanish are raiding us, so we're going to go to war with them. And then another chapter, essentially a local government could say, we're going to join you because that also impacts us, or we want to help you. And maybe you'll help us in the future. I don't know what the thinking was, but these little confederations were very dynamic and they were kind of non-committal. You could do it as you wished, but then other groups could say, we're not going to get involved because we're busy doing other things and that doesn't really impact us, or whatever. Or if one local group said, we have a shortage of food because of drought here, then somebody else could say, well, we'll help you out because we have a surplus. And there was just all this opportunity for collaboration at the local, really clan group levels, which was our government, I think, at that time. So it's really interesting what is being said, because these confederations or these regionalizations are almost like the niche. And then Tony, what you're talking about, like that national conversation is like that as well. So super, super fascinating. And Rod, I know you have lots of thoughts on all of these things, including regionalization. So I want to give you an opportunity to weigh in on that question, and then we'll go ahead and close with remarks from Director Skolanis.
Okay. Like you're saying, there's a whole lot to talk about regarding regionalization. I was on the task force in 2015 that led to the proposal for a certain type of regionalization by referendum. And the idea, if you look at it, is actually different from the original, I guess, concept of regionalization that Tony's talking about. If you read, there's a memo, and I talk about this memo a lot of times, from 1995, and Tony was the executive director of the Office of Navajo Government Development. And in that document, there's several exhibits, and it talks about this idea of chapters getting together themselves and actually contracting with one another to undertake a common purpose, a common goal. And so regionalization didn't occur recently, that we've been talking about regionalization for a very long time. And when you look at the 2001 Eastern Agency Navajo Council Plan of Operation, they're also talking about regionalization. They're also saying, well, we're going to phase out agency and councils, and once we have a majority of chapters that are LGA certified. But that never was implemented. And then, as Mr. Mitchell was saying, the 2011 effort for the Jislajin community to regionalize. They wanted to form regional council according to their plan of operation. They're basically trying to implement, all of the, I guess, the powers listed in Section 103. And at that time, just because how the LGA is written, the way it's written basically is, hey, chapters, Section 103 is the goal. Get your 5 management system and your land use plan, and you get all of, you can exercise all of those authorities. One of those things is contracting with other chapters. So unintentionally, that meant only LGA certified chapters can contract with other LGA certified chapters. It didn't leave any room for non-LGA certified chapters to. So, that's, maybe an unintentional consequence of, what Tony was talking about. But, through the Eastern Agency Navajo Council Plan of Operation from 2001 and Jislajin from 2011, you can see what the chapters are trying to do. They're trying to find a way where we could have, host chapters take the lead, where a region is going to benefit from, those things. And so, and at that time, unfortunately, I'm the one that, put a stop to it, but other regions started forming. The Standing Committee of the Navajo Nation Council started approving these regional council plans of operation based on what Jislajin had created. And what did Jislajin do? They based theirs off the Eastern Navajo Agency Council plan of operation from 2001. So chapters are thinking about these things themselves. They want to integrate, they want to collaborate. And so, but what's hindering is it all is 65 chapters are still not governance certified. They're not really able to, benefit just because of the way the LGA is drafted and applied. So, so that's what I'll add to,
I'm so glad that you mentioned Eastern Agency Council, because the other superstar I saw during the pandemic at the local government level was Standing Rock and Johnny Johnson and his team, serving 20 some odd chapters in getting relief out, and then also Sheep Springs. And so, it is happening. The local governments are allying in many ways, and it seems like it would be natural that at some point we will have more regional governments, which is kind of exciting. So Director Skorlanis, do you want to close us out for the day?
Sure. Well, I have a lot of hope. I feel like, there's some great minds here, and we're all in key positions with the Navajo Nation, And I know our president and our speaker, many of them, they really support local governance. And I know the chapters out there, they're wanting innovation. They want to, I've talked to a lot of the chapters like Coal Mine, Cameron. There's a lot of chapters out there that do intend to get local governance certified, And there are some that are wanting to really exercise authority, the Chi is one. They have all that tourism, all those national parks, And I know Luke chapter. I really one of the thoughts when we were creating Local Governance Act was green belts. Our chapter can take over a central government function like running a park system, and what a perfect opportunity at the Grand Falls if the chapter itself created its own park system. And so those kinds of innovation, again, we just haven't tested all these pieces, and I want to. I'm because in this role, I would love to work with chapters on some of these pieces because it helps the nation, And that's where we have to think about it, is that there's only so much we can do from the central government, that the chapters are the ones that are really at the local level, that they really are the ones that are intimate with the opportunities and the challenges, and that if they can craft those, whatever, that development, if they can really, if we can empower them, we can help them. It's just really, it's a mind shift from the central government. I think we'll get a lot more, a lot better results, a lot more effectiveness, so I just want to say that, and I'm really honored to serve in this role again. It's like having a second chance. Maybe I'll have a government development again one more time, but it is, it's a some of us, we care for our nation. Yeah, we Director Mitchell was saying, that we're very infant, and we really can we shouldn't tear down our government. We should really work to innovate and to build it. And that's really, I feel like, the opportunity. That's why I'm here, and I'm here still, and I'm going to be here for forever, and trying to improve our nation. So yeah, Koro, Ethel, though, Roger, for having this discussion with us.
Absolutely. Well, ahead to both of you, and thank you so much. And being from Loop Chapter, which was the first chapter created, local government is really, really important to me. And so I'm just so glad that we were able to have this conversation. And Rod, is the work that he's doing, it just feels like the leadership at Navajo right now is super interested in local government and strengthening it and lifting it to the next level. So I'm really excited for what's going to come in the next couple of years. So thank you both for the amazing work that you do and for the incredible perspective you brought to this conversation. So, Hiahat.